Hello, everyone. I hope you're well, playing and are making the games that you all love. You're joining me, your host, Max Pez, senior level designer over at CD Projekt Red. But not only do you get to hear this smooth jazz, we get some of the exotic tastes in our ears today from the Oceanic region with the lovely, incredible, and always friendly Mr. Michael Howe, senior level designer over at Sledgehammer Games, Melbourne. Welcome.
Thank you kindly, Max.
Absolute pleasure to have you here, mate. How have you been?
Pleasure's all mine. I've been pretty good, mate. Yeah, pretty good. I've actually made my way back to sunny Australia, so it's nice to be able to catch up with the family and be doing some level design down under.
No, mate, this is great. I mean, for you, because you've been all around a bit, so it must feel great to finally be reunited back home.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I spent about 10 years making games in Europe and Scandinavia, so it was just on about 10 years that I returned home. So the family's pretty psyched to have me back and just catching up with them and exploring Australia.
That's brilliant, mate. That's brilliant. 10 years, man. That's an incredible time away, really, in the grand scheme of things. That's incredible, man. And for those who may not know much about, you, do you mind giving a bit of an introduction to who you are, mate?
Yeah, of course. So Michael Howe, senior level designer, working at Sledgehammer Games in Melbourne at the moment. I'm working on Call of Duty 2021. I'm pretty excited about that. And I've been making games and designing levels and game designing for about 16 years. Started in 2006, which is making me feel very old. I've worked on a lot of different products and IPs, worked with Hellboy, worked with Master Chief, worked with The Division, Sniper Elite, quite a few different games across that spectrum, even some dancing penguins at one point.
This is the bit we all want to hear more about, mate, the dancing penguins, where the inspiration came from.
I'd consider myself a salt of the earth level designer, but I've definitely got some experience in game design as well.
No, that's great, mate. And that's kind of also why I want to pick your brain a bit on this with working on such a range of different titles, mate. Like, I guess, can you expand upon, because each game is different, right? And you said you've worked on different ones. How do you, you go about designing for different games, and do you find that there's any crossover from previous projects?
But now, a quick word from today's sponsors. Today's sponsor is Mudstack. It is the only asset management and collaboration platform custom built for game studios and digital artists. Mudstack is built to solve problems. The key three solutions is finding assets. We all know when you have such complex naming conventions or that you don't have a tag system, it can be really hard to find that. So instead of that, what Mudstack does, it creates a system that works for you rather than you being forced to work with these parameters, giving you such things as tags and filters search in order to help you organize your asset files. Artists don't use version control, whether that be perf or subversion. Version control, as many of us know, can be quite a daunting tech to use, or can also be something that we struggle to get to use. But not with Mudstack now. Step away from that complexity of source control and get version control that is built for artists first. The reviewing process. We all know that it takes time to bring up the assets you need in order to quickly get it reviewed before it's being sent back to the drawing board. But with Mudstack, what you can do is have your art, your assets reviewed at any time, right there in the browser. No more searching, downloading, or rushing to open these files right before the meeting. They can be reviewed at any time by anyone. So if you're looking to clean up your files and make your asset browser as smooth as possible, go no further than to look at Mudstack. All of the links will be in the description down below.
Definitely. I mean, obviously the similarity of games will help. It's kind of nice to be able to challenge yourself, though. And then explore like maybe a different role. As an example, when I went in as a lead level designer on Halo Wars 2, it was working in the RTS genre, and I'd never actually officially made levels for RTS games. I'd definitely dabbled in it in Company of Heroes to Mod Maker, and also going way back to Red Alert or StarCraft. So it was kind of like taking principles that you knew worked and then applying them to a new genre. And one of the things I definitely like to do is just make sure that the framework of the game is kind of set in a fairly comfortable place. So coming into that title, it was for me making sure that all the metrics were rock solid, and that the levels that we were going to develop were going to be safe to art. So just really trying to make sure that those metrics were thoroughly tested, and that we were comfortable moving massive armies through these environments, and then play testing things religiously, I think, is so key when you're making multiplayer focused games. So that was something that we did a lot on Halo Wars 2. But the sensibilities, I think, of like making sure you have rock solid metrics were something I would have been establishing in other titles I'd worked on as well.
Yeah, mate, that's it. I think also that this is something that I wish I knew more when I was starting, was metrics, because it's such a vital part to level design. Do you have any kind of like either tips or kind of steps you go through when you're trying to figure out the best metrics for the games you're working on, mate?
Yeah, so I think that's a really good question. Like for me, you don't want to change metrics lightly. So if you're working on a game which is actually fresh and new, I think that gives you a bit of freedom to really play test and work out what works best for your character, camera, and controls with the people around you, drawing on the experts around you, having those dialogues and conversations together, signing things off together, I think is so critical to making sure that those things are improving as you move through development. If the metrics are already defined and you're working on a sequel, then I think it's kind of about like not changing the things that were working really well, and then working out where you can improve on things that are there. And that is something you really need to be careful of, because the secret sauce of a game is so critical to its success. So if you're coming into a successful game, you've got to be thinking, wow, this is really good stuff already. So it's really collaborating again with the people around you and agreeing the things that you think can be improved. And I think as well, listening to your community to make sure that, this might be one of their gripes. They've said, hey, I want, this improved. And therefore, you've kind of got, a bit of a trifecta of things. You yourself will have identified something you want to improve. Other developers around you are saying it's important to fix. Your community is saying so as well. So then you can refine based on that.
Yeah, man, no, I think it's... you mentioned the part of the community. I think that's such a huge part into game development. Like it was still obviously heard from in previous years, but now where we have such an incredible way to interact with the community, whether it be through social media, or we have community representatives and community managers in the studios as well to help gather that information. It's quite it's quite cool and impressive the amount of like feedback you can get to improve as well. When you're thinking about that, you mentioned obviously different designers yourself and the community. I guess how do you decide which kind of feedback is the ones to pursue? Obviously, we only have a certain amount of time, etc., when working on games. How do you best figure that one out, mate?
Yeah, that's a really good question as well. I think for me, like, coming into Sniper Elite 3, we had a lot of feedback from the Sniper Elite 2 community on what they thought was important to the title. A lot of blue sky thinking about, obviously there's sometimes surveys that go out asking the community, what features would they be, really excited about for a sequel. So I think there's a lot of that kind of coming together, as well as the actual sort of, either Twitter or your discourse with your community manager, and he's collating a lot of the feedback for you as well. And I think it's important to kind of get that and not be too reactive. Like for me, it's really important to understand exactly what it is someone's asking for as well, because, full credit to the people who play our games, but a developer will understand how to actually give them what they want by maybe asking more questions, because I think it's important that you get to the root of a problem rather than taking an offered solution as a way to fix their problem. Because it's kind of like, as an example, when you're speaking to a programmer, I never actually go over to a programmer and I say, hey, I want you to do this to fix this. I always say, hey, I've got this problem, and then what would you recommend, or what are your thoughts? Just keep it kind of open so that then they're free to apply a solution which they feel is best. So it's probably boiling a bit down to the adage of measuring twice, like really understanding the problem and seeking to understand what it is that the issue may be, and then actually applying a solution, but collaborating again with other developers to test the solution together and make sure that you feel what you're doing is fixing the problem. In the case of like a giant game, it's obviously always going to be really hard to understand the true gravity of what you're doing until a lot of players get their hands on it. So sometimes you do have to think on the move and think while you're running to approach solutions quickly, but to keep the community happy.
Yeah, man, I think you raised a great point there when you gave the example of talking to a programmer and how to leave it open ended. I think that's another thing that people don't, especially those aspiring to get into our industry, don't think about as well, as it's a group effort, right? There is a lot of people, incredible people working on these projects, and how best to communicate. As you said, you don't want to dictate things. The more heads are normally or views on a project, sometimes you can come up with some crazy and incredible ideas from that. And I thought that was just a great point you made on how to communicate. I thought it was great.
Thanks, mate. Yeah. I mean, I think it's good to have a forum for ideas as well, because some of the best ideas will come from other people. So whenever I've been in a lead design role, I've always tried to set up a page for any developer to put in like just an idea about what they think could be cool for the product. And then you've got that, sitting on Confluence or wherever, and you're not being dismissive of any idea from anyone. You're always kind of reviewing it, trying to understand what they're after, and then if it's right, or whether it's right or wrong. I still think it's really good to create that conduit for ideas for all the developers around you.
Yeah, man, I completely agree. I think it's such an important part, because when you're on a team as well, right? Like, no one wants to make anything bad at the end of the day. No one is setting up to finally I can make the worst game possible. So it's always what people want to do is come with the best ideas that everyone can. So I think that's a great point there, mate. Now, you mentioned obviously a little bit earlier there when we talked about like the fundamentals and working to make sure that they're in tangent in order for us to start blocking stuff out. And you said previously offline that you've worked a lot with gameplay in that. So can you kind of describe the process of working with gameplay designers and how important that is for us as LDs?
Yeah, I think for me, like when I'm in a gameplay role or I'm working with game designers, it's really critical that you both have a common knowledge of the game's pillars and what's really important to the design of the game. So obviously, for a level designer, if you have a really good working understanding of the pillars and everything that's really important to the gameplay, maybe even a deeper understanding of the AI that you're going to be putting into the environment, it's going to make your levels much more, they're just going to play better, to put it simply. And then it's quite often that level designers might do a little bit of lifting or prototyping or some kind of actual salt of the earth game design, particularly if the game designers are really loaded, and a lot of companies don't mind doing that. So if if your level designers have really good game design sensibilities, then they're able to prototype and create things for their levels, which are going to improve the gameplay. You don't just want to walk into an environment and kill everything. It's kind of like very derivative. Whereas if you walk into an environment and your objective, let's not say kill because it could be any kind of game, but you've got a primary pillar. Let's say, it's to, I don't know, collect coins, and you've got to collect an amount of coins in a certain amount of time. But then you always have a plate to spin, something that makes it more exciting. And in Mario's case, going back to a foundational game, you're collecting all these coins as you run around. You've got a time limit, and you've also got enemies that you're dancing around as well. So they don't just make a game simple. You want to challenge players a little more. And I think the best level designers have that kind of thought process where they're like, hey, if I walk into this environment and I just kill everything, I'm not really enjoying that. But what if there's time pressure, or there's a huge, I don't know, water tank which has got a crack in it, it's about to explode and flood the environment, and I need to kill these guys quickly. Then straight away that's more interesting. Or if you can be reductive as well. You can make it that you force the players into a single position, and then they can't move around to outsmart the enemy anymore. But that makes it more intense because they're stuck in a single position, but still have the other verbs and affordances that they usually would. So just working out ways to mix things up, I think, is really critical to good gameplay and good level design.
Yeah, man, I completely agree. I think there is that element of teaching and making sure players have mastered the skills, but without it becoming repetitive, right? And they said just adding a different twist in there just to help make it more memorable. And you mentioned there about game pillars. I think this is such an important thing, and I've seen many people either not reference it, not think about it, or some places I've worked just not use it full stop. And it is a shame because I think those pillars just instantly help to communicate to everyone what the game is about and how to best serve the design you're doing for the game as well, right? It's such a important element to the game right off the bat.
Definitely. Yeah. And I think the second you clarify them as well, it really helps everyone develop a common vocabulary for the game and make sure that the features that they're developing actually speak to the pillars of the game as well. So, as a lead designer or lead level designer, both having a really keen understanding of those pillars and then supporting the roles around them, I think is good. And you might have a conversation with someone in UI about supporting a level design mechanic that's in your level. But if you both don't really understand the pillars, then that conversation will probably be longer, or it might fail because you get something back that doesn't service the needs of the level. But if you both really understand the pillars, then maybe it's in Halo Wars 2 we had clarity and readability, epic moments, meaningful strategy, these kinds of things, which, if I was talking to UI and then they were like, oh, clarity and readability, okay, I can't make something really complex for a UI mechanism. It needs to be super readable, almost like a chess piece, so that a player instantly understands what that UI is trying to teach them.
Yeah, man, I think it's such an important one that can save you time and can just make your life as a developer easy. So if there are people obviously working on indie games or trying to recreate levels in a certain game for their own personal work, do break down and see if you can break down the pillars first. I think that is the best way to start for anyone. I think it's just such a good one, man.
At Level Design Lobby, we believe everybody has a story to tell. Hobbyist or student, freelancer or veteran, we made it our mission to unite those who share our passion for creating and developing great games. Thanks to our generous Patreon backers, we've been able to do just that. So if you've already pledged your support, thank you. If not, you too can ensure the future of Level Design Lobby, helping us to create even more exciting content, collaborations, interviews, and much more. With awesome perks and rewards, whether you're a seasoned professional or just getting started, you're sure to find something for you. Want to share tips, tricks, and advice with passionate, like-minded developers? Our awesome community Discord has you covered. Fancy practicing your level design? creating strong portfolio content, and having fun? Then try our level design weekends. Or perhaps you want to individually discuss your work, hone your skills, or level up your career? Then consider our one-on-one mentorships. If you share our vision, then go to patreon.com/level design lobby for more information and to pledge your support. Thank you.
My next question for you, mate, because I'm keeping you on your toes, firing them fast, buddy, is that of like, you've mentioned you've worked a lot with AI, and I think this is such an important one to designers as well, with its different varieties of AI, how we best use them. What was that like, and what was your experience working on that, mate?
It was actually a lot of fun, to be fair. I think like the logic of AI and then assessing the logic of their behavior, how they react to different stimuli, using all the different variables that you can to improve an experience, I think is a lot of fun as a game designer. And also being mindful of them as a level designer, I think is really critical to good level design. So, little things like the auditory range of an AI, when are they going to be able to hear you? Are they going to be able to hear a footfall? Are they going to be able to hear gunfire? How will they react to an explosion? And understanding how they will scale through their behaviors based on different stimuli, I think is really interesting. And, a lot of the time games might potentially overlook those sorts of things. Like, are they going to react to a bullet impact? Are they going to react to a whiz-by where a bullet goes close to them? We had a really interesting one on Sniper Elite, and I don't know at the time that someone had done something specific to it, or at least not to my knowledge, where I noticed in Far Cry at least, if I just threw rocks around all the time because it's a distraction stimuli. So I'd throw a rock and see if the AI follows it. I throw another rock, the AI follows it. And I throw another rock and the AI follows it. And then I was like, that kind of is a little bit immersion breaking. So when I was looking at the AI design for Sniper Elite, we put a cap on that, and we said, after, I think it was 2 rocks, the third rock, he's going to go like Achtung or something, and then you actually move the attention to the player, because at that point it feels like it's you're breaking the suspension of disbelief. So you want to make sure that the AI behave realistically. And then as far as actually developing levels with those things in mind, I think it's kind of, as much as anything, about flipping the camera around to where your AI are going to be and almost thinking like a player, because a lot of the time the AI and the player have similar affordances. So you can kind of think to yourself, if I were a player and I was spawning where the AI are spawning, what affordances do I have? What could I do to hunt the player? Where can I go to make the challenge more interesting, more challenging for the player? And that for me is always helpful, just kind of spinning myself around into the AI's position and making sure that they've got the affordances that I would want as a player if I was approaching them. That's kind of just a critical thing, but you could go much further. I don't know how long you want me to go on, Max. I should let you get a word in edgewise.
Trust me, mate, no one's coming here to listen to me for this episode. No one wants to hear me speak. This one, champ. So if you're enjoying it, please go ahead, mate.
It's a lot of fun, to be fair. Like I think you want to be creative with the player experience as well. So something I was always mindful of when I was speaking with my really talented team that I work with on Division 2, and also when I was prototyping and testing things myself, was trying to make sure that the player, we touched on affordances, but I would kind of look at where the AI was spawning in, how much stress I was creating for the player, and then making sure that it was within a comfort zone that I thought was manageable for a player on the difficulty they were at. And then I was also trying to give them, something that they could do through their own arsenal, through creative thinking, through movement, that would improve the situation for them. So in the Division 2, we always, and you might know this as well because you worked on the original, but we always wanted to offer players a strategy of potentially being able to circumvent the AI. And that's something that actually makes you feel smart as a player, because if you just create a duck shoot where people arrive in a corridor and they're firing at each other, that is more motivating them to go into their arsenal, use skills or something to overcome a challenge. But if you give them, part of the environment, which is, maybe it's a hole in the wall that they can leap into, and straight away a hole is inviting, but it's also a little bit dangerous because you can't quite, if it's a smaller gap, it's straight away making the player think, I don't know what's in there, but it could be an affordance. It makes you feel a little bit sneaky. And then once you're in there, you're a little bit protected. You've actually got then a choke point where you know where the AI can come from and what's ahead of you maybe takes you to an elevated position or something. So I think for us in Division 2, that was something we were always keeping in mind, was ways to create circumvents which led the player to maybe an empowering position so that they could use the strategy of movement to bring the gameplay into a fun place.
Oh, that's awesome, man. See, it's really interesting to hear this, because we had similar philosophy, obviously, as well with Cyberpunk. But the one that I thought was the most interesting when working on it, because we all have patrols, right? Normally, when you have combat games and enemies, you tend to have patrol set up. One of the things that we kept trying to think about was making sure that the patrols had a purpose. Like, I was recently playing through Sekiro, which, again, great game. I get my ass handed to me every time I play it. But what I noticed straight off the bat is, like, you've got these patrols, and I just stopped and I was like, why are they moving here? And it was something that we tried to do. And I'm not saying we did it all the time and all the best, but that was one of the things that I enjoyed learning about when on CP was, okay, if I do have a patrol route, which again either pushes players in a certain direction or affords people certain opportunities, in the context, if I was this AI, why would I be moving around like this? And that was something that, again, just from my experience, was just a very interesting one to think about. And luckily, we had animation support as well. So when they got to a spot, it wasn't just they stare out into the wilderness. They were actually doing something, interacting with props, or maybe leaning to take a phone call. Yeah. All of this. So yeah,
I think you're bang on, because it's so important to have that layer of believability, and players, you'll see them create videos or be quite critical of AI who are doing stuff which doesn't make sense. I mean, and there's a whole section of memes on the internet now, isn't there, with the NPC character kind of Skyrim music.
Oh yeah, I love that so much.
I love them as well. They're amazing. So it is so important to have that layer of believability and make sure that you're factoring it into that. And I think it's kind of like, as part of forming a strategy for a player, observing and then planning and executing on that strategy is part and parcel to that. And in the observation phase, if they're observing and then the AI aren't doing something because they're not escalated yet, they're not attacking, then that whole phase of combat, and the believability of it and the immersion of it is going to be compromised, because they're not seeing something cool. But I think one of the best references to that is Splinter Cell Blacklist, where you could really pick off the AI, and then they would notice their friends going down, and then they'd radio check in kind of thing. All these kind of layers of stimuli for the other AI if you killed someone and just left their body around, or that kind of thing. It was really cool. So I'm sure there's opportunities for that as well, like to make that observation layer into the gameplay.
For sure, man. And I think, again, with the observation, if there are stealth opportunities like the Splinter Cell franchise, you kind of want to know almost when's the safe point to interact with them. Like, if they're still doing the same animations of just looking into oblivion and they just stand still, you as a player don't know, hey, maybe they're going to turn around at any moment. And it was a similar thing again with CP. We thought about, if someone is kneeling down, that means that they are static. So it hints the player, okay, I have a window of opportunity for that, or they're on the phone sort of thing. So it's like you have those kind of signposts for it, which I think is great. And I think another great example is Metal Gear Solid 5. I loved how the enemy would change after a while. Like, they started wearing helmets if you were only doing headshots. they started to place multiple inflated versions of enemies if you have gone around and would take everyone out.
Oh wow, yeah, a bit of
And
subterfuge from there.
oh, dude, like it was incredible. I mean, a lot of wasted bullets on my end, but they're just the one thing I'll say always about the Metal Gear franchise, and I think same to Death Stranding as well, is because we spoke about game design, but the amount of like options you have. Like you can place down your own inflatable enemy, right? Or let's take the cardboard box even more, for example. The famous iconic one, stealth, move through, but then you can do it where you paint an enemy on the front of it. So from a distance, the enemy like just thinks you're a comrade. Or you can put like a sexy image of a woman on the side, which lures them in. Or you can run and dive and slide on it. Like there's a different way to move. The fact they turned a cardboard box, which again, the iconic symbol of that franchise, and expanded on it, like that to me is the most important thing when it comes to gameplay. Is I hope I'm saying this right. It's depth, not breadth. You want to make it so use it in multiple ways, not have a bazillion things for the players to master.
Yeah, I completely agree. There's kind of an unwritten rule of game design is like you don't make it a one and done. You know, you want to introduce something to the players and then have them develop mastery of it and have a fun experience using it in creative and different ways.
For sure, for sure, man. And I wanted to ask you like one more question on the because you've previously been a lead, and that's a very and I really kind of want to drive home this point. And I've never been a lead, but speaking to the knowledgeable man yourself, mate, on this, it is such a different position to like designing levels, right? Like it isn't the same kind of thing. I want to just get your thought process on what are the big differences from being a level designer to a lead level designer, and what do you think of the elements to being a good lead are?
Okay, sure. I think for me, I've been in three different lead roles now, and each one has always presented different challenges. But I think most of the time, the thing that you need to be mindful of is having enough time to bolster the team and support your team is so critical to your role. So starting to realize that you maybe aren't going to be able to work on levels at all. You know, it could be that you have a big enough team that you don't actually make the levels anymore. So it's being prepared to deal with that for starters. So the fact that you have to take maybe a little bit of a creative step back, but then through your feedback and collaboration with the teams that you work with, you know, a lot of the time that creative outlet that you have is driven through the teams themselves. Like particularly in a lead game design role, obviously you're actually trying to create a vision of all these systems and you know obviously supporting with documentation and these kinds of things as well. But it's almost like you're convincing people that these things are good as well. You need to be a bit of a salesman, I would say, to be able to convince people that the ideas that you're coming up with are good. And I think it's having a holistic understanding of the systems and departments that you're going to be interactive with. So particularly lead level design and lead game design roles, you need to understand how the ideas you're having are going to affect these other departments. Because the second you come up with an idea which is just freakishly expensive, you'll probably scare people more than anything, and that's not good. You want to be coming up with ideas that are at least, you know, maybe you can go a little bit scary at the start of development, but throughout the course of development, once you've kind of, you know, maybe ranked your features and they've been signed off and you've got a big kind of suite of features that you're going to support with all these departments, you've worked with production to scope them, and you know, these are kind of all these fundamental steps that come with creating a game that is manageable and that can be made within the time frame that you're estimating. So you've got all these things sorted, but you're still going to be looking for opportunities to improve and to polish and to make things fun. So I think, you know, the best leads are able to kind of collaborate with people, understand that the things that they're asking for, are going to cost time and energy for the developers, and being sympathetic to that and making sure that, you give them a really clear understanding of what's expected from them, and how, you want a feature or something to work, so that, the worst thing you can do is just go, I want to do this thing because I saw it in a game. You need to understand exactly what you're asking for, what the impact is going to be, how long it might take to make, and this will mean that the people who are going to execute on it can kind of respect that as well. They can go, wow, this has been thought through. The caveats have been thought through. This person understands what they're requesting, and they're not taking it lightly. And then it's kind of fun to hash it out together as well. I mean, no single lead or no single individual is going to be the be all and end all of information. The best conversations that you have in development are those kind of gotchas. Like when you sit there, I used to sit with my senior AI guy, and we'd sit there kind of, thinking of all the caveats of different behaviors for the AI. And I never assumed that I would have them all nailed down, but he still respected the fact that I would do my homework and research other products, competitor products, gather a lot of reference, understand what I was requesting, and come to him with a fully spec'd design that he could then challenge. And I think that's good as well for people to challenge each other.
Yeah, I agree with that, mate. I think, and again, I've not been a lead, but I do think that element of the thought process in thinking about it is so important, because we sometimes may not think that an element may not be expensive, but when you factor in, as you said, okay, you want this from AI, now we have to think about animations. Do we need any sort of sound cue from that certain feature as well? And it's amazing how quick that stuff can spread and roll out of control if you've not thought about it. So I think honestly, great stuff there, mate. And I think what I've noticed as I've gotten older, to me, what I think makes a good lead is one that like helps the team, and as you mentioned, like think about it, but also we're all people, right? And we all want to be creatively either fulfilled, or maybe we have a certain role we want to hit. These kind of elements, that really, it's such an important thing as a team for us to all be clear, like we talked about with the game design pillars, what it is as a team where we're all working towards.
Yeah, for sure. I guess for me as a lead, I want to be clear that the team understands what it is they need to deliver. Certainly in a lead level design role, like something we're always trying to support the team with was like really good guidelines too. Just a simple thing like a guideline. If I mean, it happens, let's be honest, if I got a task which had no description and then it was just like do thing, as a developer, I'm going to be a bit like, frustrated. Like, what is thing? Like, why do I need to do it? How does it improve the game? But if I get a task which is, has an agreed estimate, something I always did with my team was try to agree an estimate. I don't want to say to them, do this, it's going to take this long. I want to understand from them, how long do they think it's going to take? They're the ones who are making it. And then I want to make sure that the task has a really clear description. Like, what is it that's important to the task? What criteria will mean that we can sign it off and then it can go through easily? That's going to be super critical. And then also maybe there's a confluence link in the task, which is saying, this is a guideline to doing this kind of work because we've done it before and we know that these things will help and support your work in the task. And I think that, in terms of what they're actually doing on their day-to-day is super helpful. But God, there's so many things, Max. Again, I could go on, supporting them with tools. I usually every month try to speak to my teams and go, what has frustrated you with your tools? How can we improve the tools? Little things that just reminding people, because there'll be weird things. Like it'll be a funny thing. Like it'll be like, oh, I have to push shift and control and right click and do this thing to do this. And it's like, isn't that really clunky? And it's like, yeah, it's like, well, have you added a request to improve it? Let's make it better. Yeah. So no one else has to suffer from an awkward workflow or something.
It is incredible after a while how the things that, like you said, are clunky, you internalize them after a while because you're like, oh, okay, well, this is just how it is. And I think that is important, mate, to always review that.
Yeah, for sure. I think that giving people like a really good place to just put those ideas for improving the tools as well, again, on Confluence, wherever, is such a good idea, no matter the size of your studio, because people will always have better ideas about improving the tools and workflows. And as long as there's a Slack channel or a page where they can go to have that idea, at least, even if it's not going to be fixed straight away, that it's going to go into the backlog and it's not forgotten, and that people one day will improve that thing that made your life a little frustrating, then that is a little bit of sanity for you.
Yeah, mate, completely agree. But mate, I know it's we've got a massive time difference between you and I while recording this, so I don't want to keep you up too late. So I just want to say thank you so much, mate, for talking to me, for coming on the podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure just to talk games with you, mate.
Yeah, it's been really good, Max. I appreciate you taking the time as well. It's not too late here. We got 9 p.m., so still got a bit of time before bed. But it was honestly a pleasure to chat.
For sure, mate. And for those people who may want to get in contact with you and speak to you more, do you have a way that they can reach you, mate?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm on Twitter at Mr. How Designs, so you can always drop me a line there. And I mean, throughout, whether it's LinkedIn, if you're a developer or something like that, and you want to chat, I do make time for people who make the effort, and I try to, foster a good level design community as you do, Max. So yeah, but just be kind, be respectful, and I think I'm happy to help you out.
Yeah, mate, no, brilliant. I'll put down a link in the description down below for anyone who wants to reach out to Michael and understand and pick his brain more. And if you want to be in contact with me, you can do so on Twitter, which is at MaxPairs. If you want to email your questions in, then please head over to leveldesignlobby@gmail.com. If you don't want to support the show, then please head over to patreon.com/leveldesignlobby. And thank you all very much. Take care, and we'll catch you all next time.